At one point, they told my parents to just prepare themselves because I would be leaving. I would be passing away. And it was actually just after brain surgery. It was only a few days after. They were like, you know what, she's here. We might as well get this done as well.
I mean, I see that as abuse, frankly. Do you see that as the same way?
I remember having crushes on boys and stuff like that, and yet I knew nothing would ever evolve. I was so excited for dances, but I knew I'd be dancing by myself.
Perhaps I might just get to be a princess after all, crossed my mind as I watched him walk to his car, which I thought was super nice.
I have a barrier that is placed before me because of how I look, that it doesn't matter what I do, how I show up, how I work, how I act, I will still face discrimination and stigmatization. Be like, you know what, it's time. We need to just throw our hair back, march into that party, elbows nice and wide, and be like, give me room, give me a chair. I deserve a spot at the table too. And, until enough of us do that, we're going to still be creeping around in the shadow.
Welcome to the Life with a Difference podcast, a platform to amplify the voices of those living with a visible difference, and also to provide relevant information from industry leaders and experts. Hey Chelsey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you, not too bad. I'm just trying to sort out all this tech stuff. I thought a podcast was easy. I thought you just did a video call and just press record, but it's not quite as simple as that, is it? How's everything your side? You all okay?
Good. Doing the last minute Christmas stuff this weekend, but other than that, nothing too exciting.
Oh, nice. Are your girls still at Santa Claus age, or are they a bit older?
One of them is. So the older one's good at playing along, but I know here in the next year or so, the younger one will be fading out too.
Right, you always get white Christmases. You're in Alberta, aren't you?
I'm in Alberta. Not
nice.
always guaranteed, especially now with all the global warming. Right now, for example, we've had a couple snowstorms, but it is brown and looks very fall and autumny. But yeah, no winter.
Okay. I did a season out in BC when I was 19, and do you know Invermere? Yeah. It's kind of like, it's close to, it's like 4 hours from Calgary, which is close in Canada.
Okay,
so I did
and the
season
fact
out there.
I was going to say, the fact you know where Calgary is, I am 2 hours south of Calgary.
Okay. Yeah. So again, in Canadian terms, we were like right next door to each other.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got like a bit of a maple leaf tattoo on my back from my time in Canada. I had a good time.
Oh, nice.
So for people listening, which at the moment is zero because you're my first guest, we both met on a Face Equality International call. Face Equality International is essentially kind of like an alliance of loads of different facial equality groups. Would you say that's a good way to describe it?
Oh, yeah.
At that point, I was kind of thinking about doing a podcast a little bit, but I needed some friendly faces for the nerves. And then when I was on the call and it was my turn to talk, you were in the background giving me love hearts. So just to start, do you mind introducing yourself? So I'm not just scrolling through Instagram, by the way. I'm looking at my notes on my iPad, trying to be professional. Do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your visible difference? I know it's a super long story, which we'll get into, but just a brief intro.
Of course. My name is Chelsey Peat. I have a condition known as Sturge-Weber syndrome. I have a large facial birthmark and a little bit of visual impairment. And that's my facial difference. Yeah.
I'm not just saying this because you're in front of me. Honestly, your book is absolutely brilliant. Like, I'm a super slow reader. Well, I don't know if I'm a super slow reader or my wife is just like the Usain Bolt of reading. Like, she gets through like a book a week. And like, if we go on holiday for a week, she'll. If we go on holiday for a week, she'll read like 5. Like, it's a significant expense line on our expenses, but I love that about her. But yeah, I zoomed through this and I read it twice. I don't know if I've ever read a book twice before.
Oh, wow.
It's just like, it spoke to me so much. There's so much in here that is just, it's funny how we all have very different conditions in the visible difference community, but the underlying themes are all still there that kind of unite us. You know, it's feelings of isolation, it's feeling stigmatized, it's not being taken seriously. And something else that I thought you put across really, really well is that there's enough. If you see someone with a visible difference, there's enough to be empathetic with as it is, and that person must be dealing with significant mental health issues. But it often comes with a pretty horrendous backstory, of physical challenges and obstacles and painful procedures and painful symptoms. So just another reason to be empathetic towards, and in your interactions with people with a visual difference. I thought you explained that really well. I think your story is just pretty amazing. And so on behalf of the visible difference community, thank you so much for writing it.
Oh, thanks,
I think it's
Andy.
brilliant.
I something I wanted to do since I've loved to write since I was young. So the fact that I was finally able to just put how I was feeling down about everything, it was therapeutic, but it was also, I felt it was needed. It was, now with the world still struggling so much, especially when it comes to us, in the facial differences community, I was like, it's about time I need to just kind of put it all out there and say what I have to say and stand on my little soapbox and, whatever little ripple I can make it.
I like that you didn't hold back at all. It was raw and it was gritty and it was authentic. And I think that's important because we need to kind of slam home the reality of living with it. And I think you did that perfectly.
Oh, thank you.
All the proper podcasters, they always start at childhood. So I'll start there. So was there, and I'll put here, I'll skip past the part where you said Hawaiian pizza was your favourite. We won't talk about that. And when did you first become aware that you looked different? Your story sounded very similar to mine in that when I was very young, I didn't even think about it for a second. I'd go up and talk to anyone. It wouldn't matter. I'd never even considered it. And then all of a sudden you start to realise that you're different. Was there a specific time or was it kind of a gradual thing?
I mean, I always dealt with the awkward interactions when I was out shopping with my parents or out in public. You'd have that adult. It always seemed to be the adults. The kids are so much more understanding. The awkward stares with the adults or the awkward tug of their kid, pulling them away because, that child has something. It might be contagious. But for me, the real part was when my peers started to be affected. And that was probably in early elementary school. So those first few years of school, it was, everybody kind of starts clicking off into their subgroups. And I didn't have anybody. And it was made apparent very quickly. And then the bullies started. And between the bullies and the segregation, it was isolation. It was awkward. It was, I was like, why? I'm so sweet. I'm kind. I do everything that everyone else seems to do. Why? And I realized it was because I was different, more different than anyone else.
And how old is that? How old is elementary school?
I would say I was probably 4 to 6, somewhere in there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, as you say, it's very hard when it's your peers, especially in a environment where there's often not adult supervision. So in school, when you're in playing, and then it kind of becomes the law of the jungle a little bit.
Yeah.
How were your early years from a social and psychological perspective? Did you start to really suffer with your mental health at that young of an age, or did it affect you that much?
I wouldn't say it affected me that much when I was younger. I had such an incredible family support system that, even if I had maybe a rough altercation or an awkward conversation, I would go home and I'd be a kid. I'd be happy. And, just like kids that, they have a bad day, they move on. Mm-hmm. For me, more of the psychological aspect of it was more in the preteen to teen years. The hormones were starting to kick in. I wanted to be like any other girl out there, yet I knew I never would be able to because I wasn't like any other girl.
Yeah, I do some work with a lady. She's the CEO of a group called Eczema Outreach Support over here in the UK. She's going to be one of my guests, and she's super lovely. And she focuses mostly on the youth age group, so kind of like early teens to late teens. I think they're actually expanding to like 25, I think, which is good because that encompasses the university years as well. Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I think that the teen years are the hardest by far. I think that I don't think you ever feel more different and isolated than in the teen years, and going into the dating pool just highlights even more how different you are. But yeah, we'll definitely get onto that. Well, you were talking about your support network, and again, I think it's important to be authentic and gritty, right? So if I'm speaking honestly, I don't think I would still be here without my support network. And I related to that so much with you in that they are just an absolute lifeline, and anyone who's out there who's a carer of someone with a visible difference or a family or friend, like, you do not understand how incredibly important you are. So on page 4, you said, as I got older and dealing with the bullies and trolls, it was this base of support that I would come to look back on, not only fondly, but as a lifeline, especially in those times of mental health struggles. I didn't feel like I belonged. I always knew I could go back to my family. And yeah, I just related to that so much. I was exactly the same. So can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of your support network, please?
Well, I was the firstborn for both my parents, their extended families. I was the first grandbaby, the first niece, first cousin, everything. So when I came along, it was with anticipation. So when everyone met me at first, they were, kind of in shock about it. But they also, many of them realized I was going to need that extra little bit of cushioning love. But there was also, I found a lot of them that were like, no, we need to treat her exactly the same. So I had the uncles that would play with me, rough and like wrestling and stuff. And I'd have the aunts that would be taking me over to cook or to just hang out and chat, girls' time. Or I'd have the cousins as they got older, we'd be playing out in the backyard. And I felt like a normal kid. And after a horrible altercation or something with a bully, to just go and run in the fields or go do something with my cousins, that was more beneficial to me than I think even therapy would have been, because I was Chelsey. That's all I was. A girl, Chelsey, granddaughter, niece, daughter, sister, cousin. That's all I was. I wasn't the girl with the thing on her face.
I so get that. I was exactly the same. I think in those formative years, having that feeling of self-worth put into you, I guess, is just so important. Then when you get to school and you get to meet these nasty people that just want to make you feel like a loser or whatever, having that deep ingrained, it's weird. I guess it's confidence, but at the same time, I think a lot of us struggle with our confidence. But I think there is a deep feeling of self-worth and confidence that comes from your family from a very young age, just making you feel great and making you feel normal and making you feel just part of the family. As you say, yeah, my tribe just could not have been more important. Just definitely a lifeline. I totally agree with that.
It's having that strong foundation. And that's where I find, especially with working now that I've been older and working with people, is that's where a lot of struggles or turning to addictions or mental health disparities are people that don't have the solid foundations, someone that they can go to. Even if it's not a family member, but having a friend, having a colleague, even if it's someone you have to pay, but it's having that person there that no matter how dark of a day you've had, you can just go, and whether it's venting, whether it's crying, whether it's, however you choose to cope, but it's doing it in a way that can healthily help you.
As you say, that those people out there that don't have that support network, like, they must just be some of the bravest people in the universe. I just don't know how anyone can do that when the whole world is telling you look at, you are a certain way, you're a, whatever the nasty thing is they say, and you don't have anyone to counter that. That must just be incredibly difficult. So I think that a part of our community is definitely to try and reach out to those people that don't have those networks and be there for them. And hopefully the fact that we're going through it as well will really help. When I was growing up, I never had, you see all these brave kids now on TikTok and stuff like that, and people like you, and I never had that growing up, and I think that would have been really beneficial for both of us, for sure. Your story is really full of painful and difficult challenges. I started going through and highlighting quotes and putting in post-it notes, and I realized this conversation is going to be 4 hours long. I need to condense this a little bit. I think I was on page 6, and I was like, no, I need to condense this a bit. But when I think it was when you were around 2 years old, you were kind of essentially constantly having seizures, to the point they had to do a major operation. Can you talk a little bit about that time and then the procedure that you eventually had to have?
Yeah. One major component with Sturge-Weber syndrome is, with a lot of the patients, the blood flow can affect the brain. Basically, anywhere that the birthmark is, it can mutate the organs. So a very common occurrence is seizure activity. Struggle with that is medicating those seizures, because eventually they can kill the patient. It's unfortunate. It's horrible. I've heard of a few Sturge-Weber angels that, I mean, bless their families for what they had to go through. I was about 10 months old when they started. Most random things, little twitches here and there, all the way worked up the scale right to grand mal seizures, where I would be walking down the hallway and all of a sudden flip backwards into a full seizure. And at one point they told my parents to just prepare themselves because I would be leaving. I would be passing away. And I can't imagine, especially now as a parent, being told that. My parents were taken to several different children's hospitals and kind of given the same information. And then thankfully, one of the neurologists out in Toronto was able to say, you know what, we've seen a similar case. Bring her over. Let's take a look. Let's run some tests. I can't promise anything, but let's see what we can do. And at this point, they had trialed every medication available. Some they had shipped in from the States. Some they were trialing on me that weren't even properly out on the market yet. So I was dealing with side effects. My body was starting to shut down. I was incredible fevers, and organs were starting to collapse. And I mean, my parents, I can't imagine. But they suggested to my parents a procedure called a hemispherectomy at first, where they actually dislocate one whole half of the brain and prevent it from firing any longer, because it's obviously not working properly, and that's what's causing the seizures. It can be very successful for patients with Sturge-Weber because it'll stop those seizures. They had planned to do that. We got into the OR, and the neurologist on the procedure said, you know what, I want to run one more EEG. I want to see if I can pinpoint it. If I can pinpoint the exact location in her brain that is misfiring and causing all these seizures, that might mean I'll only have to do a lobectomy, which is where they just remove a small piece of the brain. So they ran it. And miraculously, they were able to find out that only a small piece in the very back of my brain, in the occipital lobe, or the vision center, was mutated because of all these extra blood vessels. And that was actually what was causing me to seizure. They came out, they told my parents that if I did go through with this procedure, I had 50% chance of survival. If that was successful, I had a 50% chance of having developmental delays and mental disabilities. If both of those were okay, I was probably going to come out blind or extremely visually impaired because of them working on the occipital lobe. So I can't imagine my poor parents. It was a 6-hour procedure. But I came out, and not only did I come out, I came out with a small visual impairment, no intellectual issues, and I have been seizure and medication free since, which even in the Sturge-Weber world is extremely rare, if even has happened, because usually it's caused some sort of developmental struggle. So I count myself lucky, and that's also why I do so much work in the Sturge-Weber community, because I know so many individuals cannot get out what I can. So yeah.
There was a quote actually that just made me stop and for a second. It said, from the discussions the surgeons had with my parents beforehand, there was a definite risk for my vision to be affected with the potential of full blindness. A small price to pay if this surgery would help or even stop the seizures. To say full blindness was a small price to pay to stop the situation you were in shows how horrendous the situation was. My mum unfortunately has me, and then has my brother who has autism, but she always says that the path for him was very clear, because autism is a little bit more sort of tracked out, a little bit more in place. But I think for potentially people like us with slightly more obscure conditions, is a little bit more experimentation and trial and error, and the parents, especially my mum, have to try and navigate that and try and take the opinion of the professionals, but remain skeptical. it just must be very, very difficult.
I always say that, it depends on if you're religious, and if you're not, fate, the heavens, whatever the case may be. But obviously there's a reason that you were chosen as a parent to have that child, because, and I mean, I know there are cases where the parents can't and they have to walk away, but for the most part, the ones that can and that are just able to deal with these complex care conditions, I mean, if that's not proof of angels living among us, I mean, heavens, I don't know what would be.
Yeah, did you see Amit's post the other day on LinkedIn about his mum?
Yes,
that's really cute.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're all the same in that we love our parents, and I think they play different roles, but they're both kind of equally as important. And yeah, I totally agree. I don't know what I would have done without my mum. She was just in my corner all the time, fighting for me. And then now my wife, I just feel so incredibly fortunate.
Oh yeah.
And then after that, you had your first surgery for glaucoma. Can you explain a little bit about what glaucoma is, and how old were you when you had this?
I was diagnosed with glaucoma at the age of 13 months. And it was actually just after brain surgery. It was only a few days after. They were like, you know what, she's here, we might as well get this done as well. And I had my procedures, and kind of I've intermittently, as needed, had more procedures along the way. But glaucoma for the average person is usually an age-related condition. It's something that happens as our eyes get older. The optic nerve gets pressure on it because it's not able to release fluid as quickly. And, not having it dealt with, it usually can lead to blindness. So again, usually more of a senior citizen condition. But for us with Sturge-Weber, it happens because our eyes are filled with probably 3 times the amount of blood vessels that they should be. So there's no room properly for fluid to escape or eye pressures to be regulated. And hence we deal with migraines and visual disturbances and light sensitivity. And I mean, the list goes on and on. But for myself, that's where one downside to living in Canada with all the snow, all the white light that I have to deal with in the winter. But you learn to look down when you walk anywhere. It's an easy thing to learn, but
it's nowhere near as bad as what you've been through at all. But my condition has given me a number of eye issues, and I kept getting ulcers in my eye. I remember the first time I noticed it, I was watching Harry Potter, and they were blasting spells at each other in the cinema, and I just could not keep my eyes open. And I was the same thing. Like ever since then, I kind of can't look at bright lights particularly. I'm kind of the same in that respect. So with the schoolwork on page 22. You were saying schoolwork or any fine motor skilled function was off limits with my vision blurring before me. I was left in pain as all basic pain medication would take some of the pain away, but not enough to matter. This kind of comes into kind of the all-encompassing factor of visible difference. People think it's just an aesthetic thing, and so often it affects absolutely everything. So it affects you physically, psychologically, socially, but would you also say that it affected your schoolwork and your education?
Oh, yeah. Especially when my glaucoma would have its moments where it would maybe spike. I know it happened for me once. I was probably around the ages to 14 to 16. I ended up having 2 different tubes put in my eye to help with relieving the eye pressures. But they still continued to climb. I was on different eye drops, trying different therapies. But when you got a migraine, especially with the fact with me, I have so many extra blood vessels and an area to get inflamed and sore and painful, my whole head would pulse with these migraines. You could actually walk up to me and you would see my whole face just pulsing on the left side with pain. And that's where, light sensitivity kicked in, and trying to sit in a school classroom with fluorescent lights and focus on writing or anything, I couldn't. The pain was extreme. So at one point, I even got dismissed from having to do our year-end exams because I just knew I wouldn't be able to sit there for 3 hours in that light, write down everything, and cognitively be there. The pain was extremely bad, and it kept up that way until I think I was on four eye drops at the same time at one point, just to keep it kind of under control. I know they contemplated surgery, but my ophthalmologist surgeon just kind of went, we've got so much stuff going on with you. I don't want to touch that eye. I don't want it, one more thing to the straw that breaks the camel's back sort of situation.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
waited it out, and thankfully with time, it slowly evened back out, and we were able to get it back to more my normal of a number, for sure.
Do you think you got the concessions you needed in general through school? Do you think that your condition was taken seriously by teachers and you were given the help that you needed?
No. I still had to go. I still had to go to gym class, and for me, with my visual impairment, with the peripheral issues and things, it was horrific. I would get hit in the head with balls because I never saw them coming. I still had to deal with the migraines or the light sensitivity in class. No one, I would talk about it with teachers, and they just said, "Well, there's nothing we can do." Having to do exams and things. Again, accommodations weren't a thing back in my day. I wished more had been done. I know that's kind of one thing that I always, going forward, knew with my kids, if anything ever came up, that I would definitely be fighting for them to make sure that they had better conditions than I had. Because, yeah, I know I wished I had asked for more. After a while, I kind of just put my head down and went, as long as I pass the class, move on. And, I regret that sometimes, because I know I could have done better had I been given, a little bit more, I don't want to say love, but a little bit more support. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I read your blog post recently, which was really interesting. It was talking about how the condition visible difference is not trendy, and I think that kind of links into this right now, in that there's all the concessions in the world for things that are trendy, and a lot of these things, rightfully so, they should have concessions, but unfortunately, like you said, we are still not that way, and so the concessions don't come as readily. We have to fight a lot more. And as you say, like, this is your education you're talking about. This is you trying to get yourself set up for life, and you're just obstacles in every single direction. For me, my situation was, so I suffer with my skin quite a lot, and when my skin is flaring, I mean, it literally feels like I'm covered in itching powder from head to toe, and like 80% of my cognition is taken up by the fact that I'm in pain all over my body. I slept 2 hours last night. Just horrendous. But yeah, there just doesn't seem to be the same level of concession at the moment, which is something we definitely need to sort of push for and fight for, I think.
Definitely.
The last thing I want to touch on with in regards to your childhood, was your experience with the pulse dye laser. I think you were around 5 years old when you went through that. I'm going through that at the moment, and I am. When you said it was like an elastic band ping, that is exactly what I've been telling everyone else. It's like a thick elastic band, and if someone did that on your face once, that would sting. But it's the fact it's over and over and over and over again. And I'm a 31-year-old bloke, and I have to force myself to stay in that chair. And they give you the kind of like tannin salon goggles, I think, the metal ones, so that the flash doesn't go in your eyes. And I am like scrunching that so hard with my eyes that my eyes are watering. And I'm 31, so the thought of a 5-year-old going through that is absolutely horrendous. And I'm sure your skin is a bit more sensitive than mine due to the extra blood vessels. At one visit, I can remember being almost 6 years old with 2 of the techs holding me down. One laid on top of me as I struggled to breathe. The third tech worked while yelling at me to stop moving so I wouldn't knock off my goggles. I couldn't catch my breath as I cried out again and again for them to stop. Nearly passing out, I knew I was done. I mean, I see that as abuse, frankly. Do you see that as the same way?
Yeah. And that's one reason I do so much advocating now, especially for birthmarks, because they still push such a medical model when it comes to the cosmetic aspects of birthmarks. They would much rather have you go and have those painful procedures done at any age. I'm talking, they have babies that they still are doing. And I go, just because of the parents uncomfortable with their kids and how they look, they are willing to put them through that pain. And I go, it's one thing to have them go, they're put under general anesthetic. They wake up, it's sore, it's post-op care is not fun, but to actively be okay with putting your child in a chair like that, strapping them in and subjecting them to that, I go, at what point are you crossing the ethical border? Because you've got to be crossing some border. That is, it is
100%.
not, it's not something simple like you're getting your hair cut or you're having some small dental procedure done. This is a full burn. It's yeah.
And it's not even like it's the case of, right, just one session, we get through it and you're done. This is something that happens over and over and over again. I think I'm on my 6th one or something like that.
Oh,
It happens, it takes a long time. So as you say, I do think that is crossing an ethical boundary, and it made my blood boil a little bit when I read that part where you said they tried it on their wrist a little bit and they said, oh, see, look, it's fine. Great.
Still drives me mad to this day. But again, I mean, that's where I have to, and I've actually crossed a couple doctors, like upset them because they've been like, well, you're making this out to be so bad. And I go, I'm sorry, but I'm not making it out to be anything more than it was, because this is what happened to me. Maybe that's not how it is now, because there's things like numbing creams and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if it's causing someone physical pain to that extent, only for something cosmetic, you have to ask yourself, at what point is it worth it?
100%. 100%. And can that child really give consent to have that done at that age?
Exactly.
What age would consent be from a medical perspective for a child? That's quite a difficult question, isn't it? Yeah. Well, looking back at healthcare providers over your life, what is your general feeling towards them? Is it generally positive? I'm sure you're the same as me in that I've had some wonderful people, angels, and I've had some people that I get a little bit upset when I think about them. But what's your opinion in terms of healthcare providers?
In general, I'm here today because of that neurologist, that surgeon that was willing to, say, we're going to try this procedure. I wouldn't be here today. Same with my ophthalmologist that I see regularly. I would be blind in one eye if miracle workers. In the same regard, though, if you're not willing to learn about things like facial differences or rare conditions and you have a patient, it's taking the time to be courteous and have that bedside manner. I've had doctors where I've gone to the emergency. I can remember an instance where I was asked if this was the reaction to, like, an allergic reaction to soap. And my mother and I just looked at each other, and I'm sitting there in emergency having a migraine, and I'm going, really? If this is a rash, do you think I would calmly be sitting here talking to you right now? Like, I looked at my mom and I'm like, we're going somewhere else. I said, there's another hospital. I said, I don't trust. She's like, yep. And off we went because, but I think anyone that has a rare condition or a different condition, you're going to have to deal with that. People that are so arrogant and that they know everything, you're going to have that awkward situation. But it's also learning to advocate for yourself in those situations. Stand up, 100%. Don't let yourself be run over with someone who thinks they know, and get the medical advice or the service that you need. So it's 100%. But in general, the world is here and running because of medicine and the cures that do happen when they happen. It's just the whole intricacies now with monopolies of power and money and greed and everything else that we have to deal with. But
I totally agree about the advocacy point. I think, unfortunately, and it's wrong, but it is the way it is, if you have a facial difference, you're going to have to get used to really advocating for yourself. And we're kind of trained growing up to just sort of bow down to authority, and you just can't. I don't know if it's similar to in your system in Canada, but in the NHS over here, money is really stretched and really tight, and so there's a lot of instances where they want you out the door as soon as possible, and so you just need to stamp your feet and say no, and get used to advocating for yourself, which I'm lucky that's something that my mum taught me, because she did that. She didn't take no for an answer, and she got me the care that I needed. I think it's as you say, I know so many doctors who are just wonderful people, but I think it's just so particularly devastating when you get a bad one, because they're the people you're supposed to go for to save you. They're kind of supposed to be the safe place, and so when they turn around and hurt you, I guess it just makes it that little bit harder. I had a situation where So I've got I've got scarring on my neck, but it's kind of quite faded now. But they were saying how the medical term for it was a dirty neck. I was like, okay, that's an interesting term for it. And, and they would, I'm like, I'd go in and I'd be an 11-year-old and I'm super self-conscious, and they would just kind of talk as if I wasn't there. And I had a situation where I was going to a dermatologist locally for a long time who just kind of said, we're out of ideas. Sorry, mate. We'll see you in 6 months. And I went to London and they said, you haven't even started the treatments we can do yet. So yeah, those things are very frustrating when you look back, when those people are supposed to save you, and they leave you feeling very deflated, to say the least. Moving on to onto the teenage years, the definitely the hardest part. I think actually I've got a quote here that sums it up quite well, where you said, to say the teen years were enjoyable would be a lie. And I think that I would say exactly the same thing. And then you've said, the bullying got bad for me, especially once I reached middle school. How old are you at middle school in Canada?
You either start, let me think of ages now, 12 or 13.
Okay, so just going into teen years. Yeah, okay. The bullying got bad for me, especially once I reached middle school. A classmate started a club called the Chelsea's Haters Club. Suddenly girls in my class that I thought were friends joined him again, taunting me. Did you notice that it all kind of ramped up at this age? For me, the feelings of isolation, the feelings of being different, people being more cruel, I feel like it kind of ramped up at that age. Would you agree? Is that the same?
Yes, because you're right at that age. I mean, especially for girls anyway, or for myself. I know that was, you're starting middle school, you've got the boys, you've got the hormones, you've got the crushes, you've got the notes in class, you've got everything around you. And, you want to experience that too. I remember having crushes on boys and stuff like that. And yet I knew nothing would ever evolve. I was so excited for dances, but, I knew I'd be dancing by myself. It was that awkward, people would look at you or talk down to you because they assumed you had a disability that you didn't have. And suddenly, you were kind of just left struggling and alone. And then the bullies and the trolls, they would kick in and you were left feeling defenseless. And, you might have a teacher here and there that pitied you and maybe kind of tried to help along the way, but you already were dealing with so much to have that on top. I give credit to any person that is different, that has to go through a school system, the teen years, and make it out the other side, because and even nowadays, it's even worse than it was when I was a kid. So like I say, teen years weren't fun.
Yeah, it's super, super tough. I was exactly the same, that I would have a crush on someone, or over here you say you fancy someone, right? You say I'd fancy someone, and it was just like, okay, that doesn't mean anything. Nothing's going to happen with it. I remember, seeing my now wife at school and thinking, wow, she is absolutely gorgeous, and then just moving on with my life because there was no way that she was going to be interested in me. And so, it's exactly the same. It's just another thing that kind of alienates you and just highlights to everyone else that you're different, and highlights to everyone else that you're, you just don't kind of fit in. It's super hard. And as you say, the kids now dealing with Instagram and TikTok, it must just be so difficult. It's weird. The next generation, there's sort of this Instagram side where everything's perfect and everyone looks amazing, and then you have I guess it's kind of more the TikTok side where everyone's really authentic and they kind of celebrate differences, and you just need to live your authentic life. So it's almost like it's kind of getting there a little bit, but there's still the Instagram side too.
Kind of. I know, because I know TikTok too, though that's where a lot of the cyberbullying happens. I know I was on TikTok for a while, and I was great platform for, getting messages out. But at the same time, you'd also have these people that would take your photos or take your videos and mutate them, or make horrible videos and make fun of you. And you thought bullying was bad before, but now to digitalize everything, you were left with, these horrible done up stories and things. That's eventually why I left, because I thought this is such a waste of time. If I'm going to just have all my material taken, reused, redone up, whereas at least on Instagram, I find it stays more civil. You might have a comment
Okay.
here or there, but nothing like TikTok. Yeah, TikTok is raw. It's
Okay, that's interesting to
other
know.
side
Yeah,
of the
I didn't know
tracks
that.
almost.
Yeah. Is it potentially getting banned in Canada too, or is it just America? Do you know?
I know there was talk about it, but I don't think it's happening with us. Not like the States, anyway.
I think I saw a thing in, I think it was New Zealand or Australia, where they've just banned it for under 16-year-olds. I think that's ultimately a good thing for sure. I think that will help kids. Moving into adulthood, I feel like adulthood is kind of not quite so. From my position, it's not quite as brutal, and the comments potentially aren't quite as malicious and nasty as much as that law of the jungle in the school. But it comes with its very different challenges, and
Oh yeah.
so as an example for me, I going into the working world, and then just kind of a quick example when I think of it, I ran a electrical firm, and I was kind of employing a few people, and I'd have to go into these meetings with contractors, and I'd have to come across as competent and confident and likable, and like I knew what I was doing.
Yep.
And in some of those meetings, I'm on 2 hours sleep. As I say, my cognition is taken up by the entire surface area of my body feeling like it's on fire.
Oh.
It's just so difficult, and I feel like the comments that come aren't quite as they're more subtle. I feel like there's more subtle underhand comments rather than outright cruelty, which in a way just complicates the issue. Like if someone comes up to you and says something really horrible, you're kind of allowed to just give it back to them, right? But when it's kind of sneaky and subtle and almost subconscious sometimes, that makes it a little bit more complicated. And you had a situation where you were belittled by, I think it was staff at college. A faculty member pointed out my flaws early on and belittled me in front of the class, and unfortunately that took its toll. That must have been so crushing to kind of feel like you're transitioning to that next stage of your life, and then sort of being hit with very similar issues.
Definitely. That was, I'd already had a really horrible summer because my parents had split up, and we had moved, my mom and my siblings and I, into low income housing at that point. And here I'd moved into this bigger city, and like my life was turned upside down that summer. And so I started college, was going to do the thing, was going to get my 2-year degree, was going to start being a working girl, was going to, I had all these plans. And then it was only, I think, the first semester in or something. And this instructor took this criticism from a question, bounced back and forth, that just was awkward, and then led to, well, you obviously don't know what you're talking about, or this doesn't seem like something you're comfortable with, or I forget exactly what she said, but it was something where she just blatantly went on for about 5 minutes about the fact she didn't feel that I'd be qualified enough to be working in this industry. And by the end of it, jaw was on the floor. I know a couple peers had kind of a couple times, and I was like, how I stayed in class that morning, I don't know. But yeah, it was like that next day, I just said, I can't do this. I can't go back. I dropped out and said, you know what, college mustn't be my thing. And I guess I'm stuck working at a restaurant or wherever else I can find a job, because I'm low life. And that's what I assumed. And I just went, as long as I make money to help mom pay rent, whatever. And it was a low time, definitely.
It's amazing the damage that can be done just from a few minutes. These people that are in positions of power, they have to better recognise the power that they have, and you would have thought that interacting with someone like you, that they would be aware that you are potentially dealing with feelings of low self-confidence or low self-esteem, and again it just ties back to concession. Giving some concession for you in that situation, even if you really strongly disagree, maybe just holding back a little bit. As you say, it's just so frustrating when people in positions of power abuse it, I guess, and that's something that I guess it's something that is coming more to light nowadays, which is really good. I feel like there's good work being done in that respect, and I think people are really challenging it, but there's still a lot more work to do. And I guess that kind of ties into the job market and job opportunities. So you said that many times I never heard back, or if I did in fact turn up for an interview, it was made apparent very quickly that I wasn't the face for that particular job opportunity. So again, these people that are in positions of power just dismissing you, which I think being dismissed is something very common in the visible difference community. And I guess a little bit of unconscious bias as well comes into play, because they would probably lean on the fact that, oh, you just weren't, qualified for the job. But sometimes you can definitely see through that a little bit.
Well, it's with the workforce nowadays, it's almost that assumption of, we're not that face for the company. We don't have that beautiful, angelic, perfected, I'm not getting Botox injections every 2 weeks, pretty girl look. So I shouldn't be working for the company because I need to give good face. So but I mean,
it's straight up discrimination, isn't it, though? It's straight up discrimination.
Frustrating, but it's also when it gets to the point that you can almost read it in the HR or the hiring manager's face. And I know there's been plenty of times for me. You walk in, you've got a promising start. The conversation on the phone, it's great. You're looking forward to that interview. You obviously have enough because they're asking you for references and all this other information. And then you show up for that interview. And like I say, I literally have walked in and I've made eye contact. And the minute that they take a look at that face, they look a little too long and they look a little too analyzing. And the minute that they do, I've literally 10 out of 10 times, I know that I will not hear back, or I will get that, oh, I'm so sorry, but yeah, we found someone better. Even though I find out later on, they've actually reposted the position because I was going to be that prominent candidate and not up to their par. And, it's happened a few times, especially with the reposting. And I've applied again and I've been like, okay, well, let's see. And then of course I never hear back, but it's that frustration of what was so wrong. And it's between that and never having having to have a driver's license. Those seem to be the two things that they use as excuses that, well, no, you just don't fit no, I don't think I fit with your company, actually. Thank you. Have a good day.
It just plays into feelings of isolation. If you can't get work, that's just a perfect spiral for a lot of people. You're struggling to make friends, you can't find a partner, you can't get a job, your education has been affected. It's just this huge all-encompassing thing, and we continue to be stigmatized. And I went to a you're aware of Changing Faces, aren't you, the charity?
Yes.
Yeah. So I do some campaign work for them.
Nice.
So last week I went into London with their corporate partnership management we went to pitch their charity committee of an investment fund on Regent Street, and super nerve-wracking. As you can tell, I'm not a public speaker. It's kind of my worst nightmare, but I'm trying to push myself out of my comfort zone and trying to get more used to it. If I want to advocate, I've got to learn how to be calm in myself and not let the nerves affect me. But I thought it was really interesting and positive that this big swanky investment fund in London, with all these beautiful people walking around, was open to our pitch. I thought that was a really good step forward, that a big corporation like that was open to facial difference and how much it can affect people. And the people that I was sat across from were very open to a discussion and were very empathetic and seemed to be really keen to learn. So that bodes really well. So hopefully we will continue to push past that a little bit. And because we specifically talked about the hiring process, and they were saying, as you say, it's just straight discrimination. I guess we just need more protections in that sense, like other protected groups. And then you met Matt, and I've got here, perhaps I might just get to be a princess after all, crossed my mind as I watched him walk to his car, which I thought was super nice. I remember the kind of similar things with when I met Donna, in that I just never thought that would happen to me. I never thought I would. I just thought that was off the cards for me. And so, hearing your story with that just really reminded me of that.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the struggle with us. We are literally led to believe, as soon as we're old enough, that we don't fit that cookie cutter. So we're never going to get, I won't get my Prince Charming. You won't get your princess. And it's like, I'm sorry, but why? Why the flip not? It shouldn't matter what I look like. As long as someone loves me or loves you, we should be able to get everything in life that everyone else gets. You know, our conditions were not in our control. We didn't choose this path. And that's one thing that I push and I try to work on all the time, is the fact that, you know, for all of us that had these circumstances happen, we are going to have to just trudge our own path through the forest. We're not going to follow everyone else's path. It might take us a couple different situations. We might have to try dating a different way, or work on ourselves a little bit more than the average bear, but we do. And it's the few of us that take the time to do that I see are the ones that are making those advancements or getting the princess or the prince, because, you know, we found someone that was okay with someone out of the box and count our blessings. Like, it's, yeah.
I think, again, to be a bit sort of gritty, I was listening to a podcast with Amit in the other day, and he was saying that when his wife decided to get married, his father-in-law said that he would rather kill himself than let his daughter marry him. And that's the level of stigmatization and discrimination that we're facing. And that's what people don't seem to realize, that this is a very real thing. And it's prejudice and it's discrimination to the highest level. And I think the more stories like that get out, the more people will wake up to it, for sure. But on a more positive note, how was the honeymoon period with Matt? Was it wonderful? Was it just, you know?
He definitely had to do some, you know, getting used to things. You know, I always used to joke around with him that, you know, it would be like dating Britney Spears or a famous rock star, because, you know, we always, everywhere we went, we always got ogled. And I still remember that with the baby belly, getting ogled, you know, and I wanted to walk up to people and be like, yeah, he did that. This is his. We're happy, you know, to everybody. But it was giving him time to get used to it. And I mean, we have 2 beautiful daughters, and we have been married now for 16, well, it'll be 16 years in June. So 17 years in June. It'll be 17 years in June. So
nice.
Yeah. It's,
as you say, like, there's the side of things where you kind of think, I am what I am, and you need to love me for who I am, and if you don't, then go away.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I recognise the fact that, so for example, Donna, in her early 20s, was wrapping me in bandages and doing all this kind of stuff, and it is a big kind of commitment. They've got to really sort of love you, I guess, to be able to go through that. So, do you ever have a sense of guilt with it? I sometimes have a bit of a guilt with it. I think that Donna could be off with someone with, you know, completely carefree and everything's easy. Do you ever feel that?
Yeah. And that is normal, because we have been, I mean, you watch every love story on TV, and the one beautiful guy meets the beautiful girl across the room, you know, 2 dates later, they're getting married, and, you know, it's the magical, woo, fancy. And we go, yeah, it wasn't like that with us. And I mean, you know, you feel all those cultural and identity aspects of it, and you go, I brought so much, but I also asked for so much. And yeah, you feel guilty. But in the same regard, like you say, you think back to all those instances where they took that extra time to do all those little things that we needed. And that's how you knew, like, lock to a key, it was meant to be. And yeah, so, I mean, if anything, it's magical, the fact you were able to find that. And that's what I tell myself all the time. Yeah, there's days, every husband or wife, you know, I want to hit him over the head with a frying pan sometimes. That's normal. But, you know, he's still my best friend, still the kookiest, craziest guy I've ever met. So count my blessings.
I'm exactly the same. I count my blessings for sure. I think if you go through that stuff early on and you're still good, then that bodes very well for your relationship long term, right? If you can get through that. Yeah. Then after a few years, you had your first daughter, Athena, which is a great name, by the way. How was it being a young mum with a visible difference?
Scary.
Yeah.
Very scary, because, you know, again, you're reading all the books on how to be a mom, and, you know, everyone's telling you what to do and what to expect. But until you go out in public and you have to, especially dealing with the postpartum depression and, you know, that mental health aspect, you are thrown back in. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid and your scar is not healed. You know, you are facing the world again, but you're also having to be a role model. You're having to show your kids how to be resilient and be an advocate and share your story, because, you know, they're going to have to. But in the same regard, it's a double-edged sword because, you're having to show your kids how to do all this and, go above and beyond and be an extra parent in a sense. But in the same regard, I count my blessings for my 2 daughters. I know for a fact that if the situation came up, either one of them, and I've watched my youngest do it repeatedly, they will walk up to their classmates, their teachers, people in the community, anyone who takes the time to ogle or nearly run me over with a shopping cart, and will explain to them, what's wrong with, or if someone walks up and goes, "What's wrong with you?" They'll go, "Excuse me, that's my mom's birthmark." And they'll pipe right into their spiel and they know what to say. And,
awesome.
Both my kids, they wear their pink no bullying day shirts, and they are fully into the whole DEI aspect because they have someone in their lives that, has taught them that from day one. So if anything, I'm proud to be a mom, and I will be a mom to anybody who needs one because, it's an important job.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think that's great that your kids get to see that early on. You advocating for yourself and having the self-confidence to not allow people to do that. And I think that's really, really great to see for sure. Yeah, but as you say, there's enough to be dealing with when you're a new mum, without having to deal with that as well. Yeah, you kind of just wish that people would just come straight out and ask the question, don't you? Rather than just staring, just like, what do you want to know? Just come talk to me.
Yeah. Well, and the kids usually do. And that's where I don't mind getting down on a knee and I'll talk to them and I'll totally go mom voice. And, I've got my whole spiel going.
Yeah.
It's the adults who are literally, oh my God, or that act awkward, or, like we've had all our awkward interactions with people. Or you have the people, like I say, nearly running me over with a shopping cart or following me around a store. And I go, "Okay, do you want my autograph? There's something I can do for you. Would you like to take a selfie with me? I will sign something for you." Like, move on. I got stuff to do, It's the joys. The joys.
Yeah. And then you went back to work afterwards and you experienced, unfortunately, quite a severe case of workplace bullying. You said that the office that I work for had extensive EDI, equity, diversity and inclusion practices and policies. And while I was so eager to work with them, little did I know that it was all just for show. What started with a few simple, awkward, pointed conversations led to further awkward criticisms, which then led to escalated conversations and sudden unfair workload expectations. From absence in times of need to professional methods of communication, like throwing rubber toys at my head to get my attention. So do you think this was directly related to your visible difference? Do you think that they were sort of alienating you and isolating you because you were different? Or do you think they were just generally awful people?
Thinking back on that situation, the person that I dealt with in that workplace, she had the exact same position as me. So she was a peer. If anything, I looked to her for guidance and wisdom. New job, you jump in, you want that help. I remember having conversations with her. I actually thought we were going to become like work friends. Like we were very close in the beginning. And very suddenly, like I wrote, it got awkward. And at one point, I was actually worried about my physical safety in that workplace. And I remember her talking to me a couple different times, but talking down to me to the point that, I was having flashbacks to elementary school where people were assuming my IQ. And the way she talked down to me and started to belittle me, I went, "She's not doing this with anyone else in the office." I brought it up with other people. They said, "Oh no, she's lovely to work with. What, did you upset her?" And I went, "I have done nothing wrong. I've come to work. I've done my job. I'm missing whatever part of this equation." And that's kind of where after a couple weeks of this, it kind of clicked. And I went, "She just doesn't like me. Why doesn't she like me? I have been nothing but kind." And the way that, especially with her throwing things at me and belittling me, I went, "She doesn't take me as an equal." And I went, "There's no reason that should be other than the fact I have a facial difference." And that realization of going, I worked 14 years in healthcare. I worked in grunge and COVID and havoc and struggles and all of this just to then move to this new office and suddenly be thrown into this. I went, I would have rather have worked a Friday the 13th full moon shift in the emergency department, short-staffed, lack of supplies, COVID again, rather than deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, it was a harsh reality, because I figured I had made such a movement on myself with, self-love and self-strength that, I fell back into a chasm of mental health with that, because, you suddenly think you're so powerful, and then to be just crushed down, especially after I was terminated. It was not a fun time.
I haven't experienced things to that degree, but I've experienced things in the workplace where I'm the one alienated and I'm the one on the outside.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why is that? As you say, like, I've not done anything particularly wrong. I don't know what I've done to upset people. And it just seems far too much of a coincidence that the person that's on the outside is the person that looks different.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's exactly what you say. I think ultimately, especially going back to the workplaces, we just don't get the protections that we need in terms of EDI. I think that we are just not in that conversation. It's weird because that's all the buzzword at the moment, EDI, right? And these corporations are doing big things to help with that. But going back to the trendy thing, a lot of these corporations are doing it because they feel public pressure to do so in reality. There's some lovely people, but a lot of them it's just because of public pressure. So what do you think that we need to do as a community to try and become part of that conversation?
Facial differences need to be their own aspect of DEI. For some of us, we have disabilities, and for those that do, obviously, they can use the resources and the references of that subgroup. But for some of us, we don't have disabilities. I have a small visual impairment. If anything, I have a social disability. I have a barrier that is placed before me because of how I look, that it doesn't matter what I do, how I show up, how I work, how I act, I will still face discrimination and stigmatization. Anyone with a facial difference will. And it is until we start to actually work on not the social model of disability, but instead work on a social disability that we will see any change. Because for many of us, we could be the most incredible workers. We can be authors. We can be businessmen. We can be executives. But until the world around us starts to see us as actual equals on the team, we will still fall between the cracks and not see the same DEI structure and framework and safety. So it's just having to get our voices out there, sharing ourselves, but also having a lot of these facial difference organizations maybe not work so much on the medical models, but more on the social models of protecting us. And like with Face Equality International, using their human rights campaign, or getting us more, like I say, the social disability aspect forward, and bringing us into the limelight in a good way. And whatever we can do to start with the positive perceptions and take away all the negative aspects. It's just so much to do.
Yeah, so much to do. But people like you are making it happen, with your book. So just thank you so much again for that, because that's what it comes down to, is just getting the word out, with these strong and powerful messages. When I was in that charity committee pitch, like, one of the things that kind of popped into my head, which I thought was quite useful, was that I'm in kind of an unusual position in that my symptoms oscillate dramatically. So, like, for example, today I'm kind of all good, but then some days I'll have a huge flare, and I'm able to see both sides of the coin and see how I'm treated differently, and it is just so obvious. Like, it's stark. Obviously you have all the your own internal stuff that you're dealing with, and lack of lower confidence, etc. But the way that I am treated when my facial difference is there, I suppose, is just black to white. And so, as you say, we just need to become part of that conversation and be a little bit more protected, for sure. Just kind of as a little bonus question, while I was in that pitch, one of the guys put a question to me that kind of stumped me a little bit, and I hope I answered it okay. I'm just interested what your thoughts are. He said, I have a co-worker who I'm friends with, and he has alopecia. And every time I speak to him, he's losing more and more hair. And I really like him, and I want to let him know that I'm there for him, and that if I can do anything, I'm there. And I'm sorry that what he's going through, but I don't want to make him feel unconscious by bringing it up, but I don't want him to think that I'm kind of ignoring his situation. And so I think that's quite a difficult one. So from my perspective, I said that, it's kind of nuanced. If this is a best friend of 20 years, it's different to a co-worker. But I think as a general rule of thumb, if someone with a facial difference doesn't mention it, you shouldn't mention it. Wait for that invitation to talk about it with them, because they just might not want to talk about it. Do you, as just kind of a general rule for society, do you agree with that, or do you think there's a better way to do it?
In general, I agree, because, not everyone wants to share their stories. I mean, I've been raised that was just kind of my self-defense or my mechanism of, someone would stare, or someone would ask, and I would answer, because I would much rather, clarify the fact I'm not bleeding, or my eye isn't going to pop out of my head, or something weird like that. So for facial differences, especially the initial conversations, it's definitely leaving it up to that person. If they are the type that does a lot of advocating or talking about their difference, then they're probably going to be comfortable talking to you about any topic associated with it, because that's what they do. But for some of us in the community, I know people that, they don't even turn their screens on for Zoom calls, because they just don't want to, even with other facial difference people, because they don't want to deal with anything. No negative looks, no negative comments. And that is where they are with their journey. And no one can judge another person. So really, I agree, Andy. It's kind of just leaving it where that person wants it, and waiting to see if they want to have a conversation with you about something. You're there, and especially if you've already said, I'm here for you, anytime, reach out, chat with me. You've done your thing. You have let them know you are an ally, an active listener, ready to go. It's just waiting for them to be wherever they are in their journey. And I mean, that should just be a general rule when it comes to anybody, is, there shouldn't be the awkwardness. And really, at the end of the day, someone asks someone about their face. If that person turns around and walks away, that's their choice. And if they sit there and have a conversation and become lifelong friends, that was that person's choice too. It's completely up to the person who's going through that journey.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I didn't answer that too badly. Then I was put under pressure a little bit, but yeah, I think that's the safe solution, isn't it? It's just don't mention it unless they mention it. I know it's complicated and nuanced, but that's the safe thing to do for sure, because some people are just not in a position to talk about it, and some people are suffering with it so much they're just trying to get through, and they don't want to have another conversation about it. When mine is particularly bad, and I'm just trying to crack on. I don't want to talk about it. I'm just trying to be productive. So I don't want to have a conversation. So yeah, I just think I think there's certain groups in society, especially stigmatized groups, that have done a much better job at guiding the public in how to interact with them effectively. So, for example, I had a meeting with a couple of HIV advocates, and I just think the HIV community is fantastic at advocating for themselves. Those guys, they just demand what they wanted, and they were running through all these scenarios they were in, and they just don't take any nonsense, and they say exactly what they need. And I think we need to be a little bit more like that for sure, and start demanding what we need. And I think a side effect of a visible difference is that so many of us have low self-esteem, and so advocating and being confident and being firm is very difficult.
That's where we've spent so many years being pushed to the shadows, that we're comfortable in our shadows, and we've spent so much time peering into the windows and not being in the party. So it's having to be like, you know what, it's time. We need to just throw our hair back, march into that party, elbows nice and wide, and be like, give me room, give me a chair. I deserve a spot at the table too. And, until enough of us do that, we're going to still be creeping around in the shadows. And I go, you know what? I do like my, dark romance books, but, we don't need to live there always. We have to have some aspect of life. And until enough of us can be, in those prominent roles in, CEOs and anchors and on TV and models and, just out more visibly in places, people aren't going to see us. They're still going to just only hear about us from the shadows. So it's getting out of the shadows.
100%, 100%. Yeah, for sure. Last question. I won't take up much more of your weekend. I nicked this question off of Tim Ferriss. He said this was a good one. So, if you had a billboard in Times Square or Piccadilly Circus that the whole world could see with a short message, what would you want that message to say?
I would probably do a collage picture of a whole bunch of facial differences. And on top of it, I would say, we are not monsters. We are friends. Or something like that.
Awesome.
Just reminding people that, again, you're going to come across people that look a little different. Some of us more so than others. But if anything, we're the ones who hold the best parties. We're the ones who have the coolest perceptions of life. I mean, our journey, the places we have gone, the people we've seen, the procedures we've had done, the things, like my book is a small chasm of what I have gone through. But, we have done, but we also interact with so many different people because we have such an array of individuals that take the time to look at our empathetic souls. Our empathy shines brighter than anyone around us because we've been through those battles that no one knows about. And it's, listening to our stories or becoming our friends or just being an ally, that those are the people that feel enlightened because they've literally walked to the closest thing to heaven on earth, which is many of us, because we have our plethora of experiences and journeys and pain and sorrow and true love and true art. And the reason so many of us are artists, we have truly seen things that few humans have seen because of the pain and the love and the existence.
Yeah, that's super powerful. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think that's all links back to coming out of the shadows. I think that the more people see of us and see that our difference ends with just how we look, really. And, we've been through some stuff, but we're just the same as you. We're just the same as, and yeah, I totally agree with that. Thank you so much for holding my hand through this first one. I really appreciate it. When you work on like a big project and then all of a sudden it's the big moment, I kind of felt like that 5 minutes before this podcast started. I kind of heart started racing and it started to get all nervous. So thank you so much for being super kind, and thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your book. It's people like you that are changing this society and moving things forward. So thank you so much, and have a lovely Christmas.
Thank you. You too.